I want to spend more time with my guests today. I think that we're living in conflict constantly every single day, whether it's a conflict within ourselves, within our family, with our children, with our frenemy. Like, I thought she was my friend. Wow, she was giving me some fighting words today, right? And all of that, right? This is the value that I'm giving my community, is having amazing leaders within their space to come in and tell us, how can we level up today? Are you guys ready? Let me see if she's ready. Oh, she's smiling. She's so pretty. I love that smile. Are you guys ready? How are you, Leslie?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me here.
Oh my God. Thank you for being here. So let's check out who's here. My sister, of course. First
Yes.
of all, I want to publicly say thank you to my sister Susanna. She gave me like a care package box, and she showed me only one thing that she was going to give me because we were like zooming. She's like, what about this and what about that? I'm like, ooh, that's so pretty. And I didn't know that she was putting it on the care package. So my husband yesterday was like, you got another box, because some people usually send me random stuff like their book or whatever they just want me to enjoy. And he goes, this is another box. And I'm like, another box? Who would it be? And I looked, I'm like, oh my God, is my son? And my husband's like,
Oh,
is there gold in there? What is happening? Is there Louis Vuitton, Cristal? What's going on in there? I'm like, never mind. I went to my room and opened it. I was like, oh my God. And I called her, and I literally took a selfie. I'm like, look how pretty it is. Look how cute it is. And she's like,
oh,
and this is from LinkedIn. Susanna and I never met in person, right? Never. Like, I want her to fly here. Oh, but she's my first one. Yay. Hi, sister. Look at that. She's like loving the duo
love
this
it.
morning.
Oh,
Oh, Jody.
oh. Hi, Jody.
I love her. I really do.
Yes.
She's so smart, and she's so unaware sometimes that she's so amazing. She's like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yes.
No, you're so amazing, Jody. If you're still watching, I love you. I really do. Not only are you smart, but you're so willing to give ideas to
Mhm.
people. And
Yes.
it's like that heart centered, right? Like, I see it. I see
Absolutely.
you. And so I'm so glad she's in the house for sure. And look at you showing up.
This is,
I'm okay. I'm
but
making that
that's why we're feeling all these people because we all show our heart. And I think that's really what ultimately connects us.
yeah, I love it. Oh my gosh, Susanna, look. It's a butterfly. Because she's always about butterflies and moving beyond boxes. I'm like, I just see it, Susanna. Look, it's hard. I'm being silly. Al, hello. Good
Hi,
morning,
Al.
sir. He's the age optimizer. I love it. He's one of the sponsor and also a speaker for our global summit, and I cannot wait for him
Great.
to school me and level me up on how to basically age gracefully, because I'm getting there. Yeah. People are like, "You're so young." I'm like, no, I'm close to 50 than you think. We're just not gonna get
You're
there.
young. You're
But
still young.
I love, I've seen people that are suffering even in their 30s.
Sure.
I have a cousin who's in her 20s and she's having issues. And I'm like, girl, get off your butt and start walking just for 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Absolutely. And also mindset. Like it really is true. Our age is in our head.
It is. So let's go ahead and start with you while I'm highlighting our beautiful people here. So, first of all, I want you to introduce yourself and what you do. But then within that, kind of think back, 20 years ago, and find within your timeline, right? Some of the significant changes in your life that got you here where you are today.
Oh, it's interesting you did 20 years, so I'll get to that. So where I am now, many know as the conflict strategist. I first I love sharing on LinkedIn, YouTube, my tips and strategies, and it's things that I wish I knew, earlier. So I want to like share that with everyone that I meet through YouTube, LinkedIn, and some of the other social media platforms. So what I do business wise is that I do customized learning and training programs, also coaching in, of course, conflict management, but also communication, negotiation, even cross-cultural communication. So I do that for different organizations, teams, individuals. And I also teach some of this at New York University, here in New York, of course. And again, similar courses, negotiation, communication, and conflict management techniques for managers and leaders. I, I love the mix of the teaching as well as coaching, working with teams, and then seeing, the results. That's an amazing thing. And how did I get here happens to be something that there was a pivotal point 20 years ago. But before that, my career started in real estate and construction and design. I managed real estate for a variety of organizations, everything from a public university to the city of New York to a Wall Street firm, startup companies, different jobs along the way. The thing that was common for every job is that I was in the middle of conflict every single day. People wanted more space, people wanted to pay less money for the construction, landlords and tenants, whatever it was, I was in the middle of it. And it's a yucky feeling that to be in the middle of it. And I had to figure out, how am I going to navigate out of this? And what eventually came natural to me is, wow, like what do we really all want? And I kept on seeing this similar thing. Well, we wanted to work together. We wanted to kind of live and work peacefully together. So we had that in common. So I would use that all the time and go, okay, let's remember why we're here and why we're talking, because I knew that win-lose kind of like, let me get everything I want, um, thinking wasn't working. It had to be different if we were going to live together. And that's really what started my thought process and my different kind of strategies and learning how to navigate this whole thing through different kind of communication, not what I learned going through school and college, uh, really understanding how people communicate, everything from the how we talk to what we say, and understanding that even when we were all speaking English, we weren't all speaking the same English. Every word people have a different perception of because of our experiences. So it was really literally trying to get in everyone's shoes. And that's what led me to here. Now, 20 years ago, there was a point where I was at a company that was essentially going bankrupt, but I was still working there and I knew I had a future there. And I thought, this is the time. I've got to go out on my own. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur because I always was an entrepreneur on the side. And I'm like, this is what I want to do full time. And I got that call that changed everything. An old boss of mine called and said, I need someone who knows everything you know, and they're willing to work for me, like for a 6-month contract, half time. I said, well, I know that person. He's, this is fabulous. I'm like, it's me. It's you. It was his call came at that right moment where I was trying to figure out, how am I going to go out on my own, leave the nice corporate job, the pay, the benefits, and then that call came, and it changed everything, and eventually led to now. I think there are probably about 10 years ago, there was one other really significant thing that I have mentioned to some people along the way. So you might have heard it. I was walking a lot, like around New York City where I was living, and still am. Even though I did take a break to go to New Jersey for a few years, but I usually ignore that. So I was walking a lot, and my friend said, you've got to enter this race in Central Park. I go, a race? Like to run? What are you talking? Yeah, don't worry. I'll stay with you even if we finish last. I go, I don't know how to run. I only know how to walk. To make a long story short, it took from that day, a year and a half later, we crossed the finish line of the New York City Marathon. I still am not a runner in terms of a good runner. I'm a runner, but I'm a slow runner. Uh, but what got me there, this team of 5 people, us working together, dragging each other, pushing each other, encouraging each other. And it really gives me chills still because the 5 of us didn't even belong together in terms of two of the people were such fast runners that it always took me twice as long to finish anything. Like literally at the New York City Marathon, they finished 4 hours ahead of me. But we stuck together, we encouraged each other, and it didn't matter who was faster or slower. And that whole dynamics of how the team worked, but also convincing myself that like mindset matters so much more than what my legs were telling me to do. They were done. I could tell you exactly what mine was when they were done.
Don't
But
be
my
mean.
mind, and then I realized this needs to be weaved into everything I do, that our mindset really leads us. It's not always what we think we can do physically or intellectually, but if I tell myself, I can do this, or let me relate it to conflict. If I know there's a solution, even when I don't know what the solution is, I'm going to find it.
Mhm.
But if I'm defeated and go, this is really challenging, I don't think we're ever going to figure this out. Well, we're never going to figure it out. So I changed that thinking of believe there's a solution, even when we can't see it, I can't find it. I've worked really hard. I'm still going to go find it again. I'm going to keep looking and work together. And that's what I really try to translate and provide that experience to, whether it's students, whether it's people who've hired me through coaching, or whether I'm doing training, that the mindset is going to get us there.
I'm so glad you said that because I just reflected on. I'm writing my memoir right now. I actually got pushed based on the most recent Rattled Awake reflection that I did about increase in Asian American student suicide because of academics. It's still happening today. And I remember
Yes.
going to college. One of my friend actually jumped off the college because she got a B and she couldn't go home to her parents with that B. In Asian cultures, you don't know, A minus is an F. So either you get an A or perfect, or don't come face the family. That's the pressure that we get. Even today, there's an 8-hour exam in Korea, and depending on what your score is, and depending if you pass or not, the rest of your life depends on that score. The rest of your life. Okay, that's how much pressure these students are. A lot of medical students, Asian. That's why I hate to say this and be biased. And when I say like medical doctor who's Chinese or Asians, I go for that because they go for perfection. Because it's embedded in our DNA. I swear, in our culture, right? It's just pushed. It's like there's no limits. You got to get going, and it's good and bad. It's good that you
Mhm.
have that drive, but it's bad because it's all your life and nothing else, right? And finding that balance. So I'm glad you said that because I just did a reflection and I'm like, I don't understand why I'm never afraid to try everything, even if I know it might not work. Like the 50 inspirational project, I just created it in 2 hours and I was going to say, okay, who's the best person to deal with it with me? And I said, CJ, that's a wrong mindset. How about who's the best person that inspires you and hope that they'll say yes? I found a victim, Nicole. She didn't know what she signed up for.
She's a great teammate.
Yeah,
And she's one of the LinkedIn people who I have gotten to meet
I
in
know.
real life. And uh, it was, yeah, just that I still remember that, like, that first second I saw her. But what's so amazing is that the energy we feel through LinkedIn, it, it was like we just took a step and we were all together. It didn't require any transition. There was no uncomfortableness.
I know. She
It was
told
immediate.
Yeah, and the sisters and I, that means supportive sisters,
Yes.
Santa, myself, Nicole, and Christine Jones, we're having a little like save money bucket for sisters so we can actually kind of, I'm hoping, I'm convincing them to come to San Diego. There's more to do here in a beautiful city. And I said, come here. We just spend the weekend, we whatever. So we're hoping to do that, right? But literally I found a victim and Nicole's like, yep, I'll sign up. And I'm like, ooh, in the back of my head, she does not know what she just signed up. But okay.
Sure.
And but it was so amazing. And I'm reflecting. I have a global summit coming up, and there's a lot of loopholes and there's a lot of things that I'm like, I'm so frustrated. I can't figure it out, and I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter because it's still gonna go through. I'm gonna push through and it's gonna come out fine. And that mentality that you said about mindset really translate to also conflict. It comes into like emotional intelligence as well, right? Making sure that you are in that moment trying to see what is the common goal for everyone and what is win-win. Sometimes it's win-lose, but how can we make it for its win-win? Sometimes it takes time to negotiate those thoughts. So my next question is, can you share some common misconceptions about conflict resolution and how can this be addressed?
So I think the first one is that usually what everyone thinks the conflict is isn't really what got them into the conflict. There's always layers. It's rare that, especially when they're encountering me, it's rare that the conflict just started and now they're like, oh, this just happened. How do we deal with this? No, no. It's usually been a lot of time, a lot of layers. And the issue that they're bringing, sometimes I've done arbitration for the stock exchanges, and they'll go, oh, it's just about the money. Sure. Okay. Let's hear it. If it was, figure out how to divide the money and it will be okay. But that's not what it is. There's usually these layers. When you listen to the story, it started years before. There was some disrespect, um, or someone didn't feel heard. That's a big one. They felt like I told them what I thought was done wrong. And they said they looked at it and there was nothing there. And then they put that aside. And then they let that frustration build for a couple of years. And then they found a new thing to say, this is what our real conflict is. No, no, your real conflict is that thing 2 years ago. So that's one thing, that whenever someone presents what their conflict is, I know that that may be a symptom or that may be part of it, but that's never all of it. So that's important, that it's not just quick, like this is our conflict and we're either going to agree to disagree or we're just going to walk away.
Yeah.
Really? But so it's not that. There's much more. And I was like, there's much more opportunity here if we start talking to each other and really listen. Oh, no, no, no. We know how to listen. So that's another big misconception, that I don't even always know how to listen well, because there's so many things that distract us from truly active listening. First of all, it's exhausting to active listen. So it takes all our energy. And when we've really done it well, we know it because we are so tired. Like you need to go to sleep right after. It uses up every cell in your body. And the reason why it's difficult is because, first of all, we were never taught to actively listen. We were read stories in our elementary school years. We were told how, like, we had to figure out how to comprehend it by answering some questions. But to really listen, we have to put all the thoughts out of our mind. We can't start thinking about what questions are they going to ask me next on the test, or how do I want to respond to what they're saying, or how can I fix what she's telling me because, or he's telling me, or they are telling me that they just told me a part of a story and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened to me. No, you don't. It didn't happen to you. It happened to them. And now you have to finish listening to their story. So there's some real science behind it. Apparently, our brains have a capacity to listen to to many more words than the speed at which people are speaking. So there's all this empty space while we're, quote, listening, and we start filling it up with distracting thoughts. And then, of course, just add in the distractions of digital stuff. So it's that the listening issue is hard, but that's when people have sometimes ended up with me when I've been a mediator or an arbitrator, where now they need a formal process because they actually can't hear each other. They need someone else in the middle to like be that facilitator of, well, what I hear you saying is X, Y, and Z. What did you hear? To the other person. They're like, no, I heard A, B, and C. I'm like, well, did you? Well, let's now ask some questions to understand what they really meant. It's that's the big one. And that people think they've communicated well.
Yeah.
So that they believe that their intended message has been received as intended. And the thing that I can tell you is that most of the time, our intended messages are never received as we intended, because the person receiving it has a different life experience. They hear different words, they have different triggers, they have different definitions of a word. So those are the three big ones
I love
that
that.
cause the misconceptions with why we're in conflict and how we got there.
I really love that. And first of all, we talk crap about Nicole. I think she heard us all the way to her job in New York. She showed up. She's like, "Oh, I made it." I just called her a victim and she showed up. Another victim coming up. I'm glad that you said that, because here's the thing. You're right. Often my husband and I have been married for 20 years and we still fight on certain stupid crap. And when you're trying to apologize, you have all the intention to apologize, right? And then when you started the conversation went well, like here you are ready to apologize, and he said something that you don't like, and then you're on a second argument. You forgot what you were apologizing for. You even forgot the first argument. You didn't even remember what it is, but now you're really upset on the second argument, not knowing why you're even upset on the second argument, because you were there to apologize in the first place, right? It's just
Yes,
human nature to kind of have this. It's not to me it's a mixture of like ego and your 1,000-mile thoughts in your mind, poor listening. And also I feel like your emotional state has to do with how you react. I feel like when I'm already stressed out, whether it's from work or a project, and then I'm having conflict conversation with my husband, anything he says, it could be like, "Honey, you're
yes,
beautiful," right? But if he said it, "Honey, you're beautiful," like that, I'm like, "Excuse me, what does that mean?" Right?
exactly.
I think it's the state of emotions that you're in also affects the way you react to certain words or even nonverbal communications. What do you think about that?
All of it is so important. First, there's different layers in there. There's the triggers to our hot buttons that have nothing to do with the person in front of us. And I know one word that I have tried to train myself not to cringe when I hear it. But if I hear the word fine, like my ears just sort of, what do you think is fine? Because growing up, when I heard that word fine, I knew nothing was fine. That's how it was said in my household. So, but I know that, and I try to keep that self-awareness front and center. So whenever someone else says like, "Oh yeah, everything's fine," I really try to listen, going, "Oh, I think they really mean it. Like it is fine and okay." And I have to hear what their definition of the word means, because my definition isn't like that. Um, you said emotions. Emotions come into all of this. You're in a conflict conversation. So, of course, there's emotions that are escalated. And we start to lose touch with hearing the content, and our emotions are interpreting everything or only hearing pieces of it. Or, like you said, you heard a word that like gets you to go off on a different tangent, and we're reacting versus, I like to think of responding as more intentional. So the reaction is just something that just comes natural, and then a response could be more intentional. And we're not used to taking pauses. Even now, when we hear a pause, we tend to fill the space. So if I take a break, now we're good at this, so you're not doing it. But with some people, if I talk to them and I leave a pause, they fill my pause. Like, no, no, I'm pausing either emphasis for thinking of what I want to say next. We're just not accustomed to it when we chat, especially in personal relationships. We're used to like the back and forth. I mean, we've probably all experienced it. You go to have dinner or a meal with a family that you don't know well. You might know one of the people, and there's a whole different kind of communication going on. I'll hear even in my family, I one of my family members, they'll answer a question. I've no like someone will hear them go, "Yep, yes, maybe." And they'll be like, "What is he talking about?" I go, "Oh, no, no, he's answering my question from 3 weeks ago. I asked him if he'd be able to come to something." They're like, "How'd you know that?" I go, "Well, it was related to a dinner, and we're at a dinner now. So I know that's what he's thinking. Dinner. Oh, next dinner. He's telling me he can come." They're like, "Are you crazy? You actually knew that?" But that's what's we can't do that in the workplace. We don't know each other at that point, and even those kind of conversations could go and get messy. So we stick to our habits versus being intentional.
I love that. And I want to read what Amber actually said here. It says reactionary messages to conflict will never land well. Listening take time and space to truly hear each side, and then communicating about those issues is key. So if you respond defensively, it's a sign you need to sit with your emotions longer. I,
Yes.
I agree with that. Here's the thing: ego, just add that to the cup. Okay.
Yes.
Because I think when you are already in conflict, sometimes it's easy to just resolve it and say, I am so sorry. I apologize for my behavior, or I had a mean spirited attitude. I'm not making an excuse, but I did have a bad day and I snap at you. Right. And so when you start with, I'm sorry, I apologize, you're taking accountability for your own actions.
Yes.
And so to me, words mean something when you're apologizing. Now, if you say I'm sorry all the time, that doesn't mean anything anymore to me, because then you're
Exactly.
saying it to make it 30 seconds of feeling, but really you don't mean it because you keep doing what you're apologizing for. But
Exactly.
then that's a different, resolution at that point. But I think if you start with I'm sorry, I apologize, most people will take back and said, okay, let's hear the rest of the apology if it's true,
Yes.
right? Because sometimes my kids will be like, Mom, I'm sorry. And I ask them, what are you sorry for? They're like, I'm just sorry. I'm like, yeah, you're not sorry because you don't even know what you're sorry about. Let's be honest with that, right?
Right. An empty apology is
Mm.
not going to move you forward. That's what I call like you're just swiping away the conflict. And there is one time when we could swipe away conflict. If you are never going to see the person again, go ahead, swipe it away. You're never going to see them again, talk to them again. But in most cases, the reason why conflict matters to us is because it's with someone we're going to see, either in the workplace or in our personal lives. We're going to see them again. And now we're like feeling those yucky feelings like, oh God, I've got to go to that meeting with person A. And I think, but you brought up the good point about, and so did Amber, about being defensive. How can we communicate differently? Because you made it clear, like, I like to start with the I am sorry. That's really important because a lot of times people walk into these conversations, you did this, this, and this, and I did this, this, and this. But once they heard the you, they're ready to defend themselves because they're pretty sure something negative is going to come after it. I've even seen it in performance evaluations where the evaluation was great, but because everyone's on the defensive, they hear the you, they didn't even hear you did a great job. they heard the you and they shut down and they're ready to defend. Last month I did this, this, and this, and I increased revenue by 30%. They're like, yeah, I know. That's why I told you. You did a great job. So that you statement is something we're all trained, and it's a trigger for many people. The other one is a why. So when we're talking about our purpose in life, it sounds positive to say, I need to find my why. In the workplace in particular, when someone goes, well, why'd you do it like that? They really might mean, hey, why'd you do it like that? I'd love to copy you. But they hear the why first and they're ready to defend, like, well, because it worked. Yeah, I know. That's why I'd love to learn from you. But the why, especially in the workplace, creates this defensiveness. And once the defense is up, then we're not being open, we're not trusting, and it breaks down the communication. We're really not sharing. And we've already got enough stuff that's preventing us from sharing. Like you mentioned ego earlier. Ego, concerned about keeping my job, wanting to do well. All those things influence how we communicate in the workplace. And then you add on another layer where someone's word triggers us to defend ourselves. And then we feel like we're always in conflict with that person, and it just perpetuates and gets worse.
I love this conversation because from what you're doing, and I'm really listening, I think that the keywords, just like SEO in your website and your YouTube, it matters in the algorithm for the software, but I think it matters in the algorithm for our mindset. Keyword
Yes.
makes a huge difference based on what you just said and based on what I have witnessed on how people perceive the conversation that's gonna, the outcome of the conversation. So I'll be mindful of that in terms of like what keywords that I'm bringing. And also, I think people also put values on certain people when you're not aware that people put you on a pedestal and that what you say to them matters so much so that it could break them in pieces. It's kind of difficult, right? Because sometimes like I have a friend and I don't know how she perceived me until after the fact. And everything that she does to me, like we were friends, we were fine. And then all of a sudden, I think she sees me in a different light. And then I started to see the emulation, which I'm grateful for. Like she wanted to emulate me because most people are like, oh, I don't want them to copy me. And I'm like, no, I want you to copy me only my positive side, not the attitude part. I do have bad attitude sometimes, but when you see that and you're like, oh, okay, keep going. And then all of a sudden you say something and then their world just come down into pieces and I'm shook. And I'm like, why did that trigger you to get so upset? And then they're like, well, because I value your opinion so much that, if you say those things, it just crushed me. And I'm like, but I thought we were just friends trying to have a conversation on how we can level up ourselves. Right. And I was thinking that we had an open feedback, like you tell me what I needed to do and I'm okay with it. But if I tell you something that you can improve for yourself as a friend and as a human, somehow I'm the mean person and then you're falling apart. Like, what is up? And then, she shows you like, so I feel like she just puts me in a different light and a different footing. I don't know when that relationship changed actually. And so it's like, okay, there's got to be something I can do, but I think it's keywords. And for me is once the friendship is broken and the trust, I don't trust easily either. So once the trust breaks, I don't go back. I just can't. I
It's
don't know what it is. Like, I can forgive you, I can let it go, because it's not good for my heart and my soul to, harbor anger. But I'm also hesitant to move forward with the friendship, knowing that that's how you see me as. So, how do you kind of like, what are some, common challenges people face that you've seen when trying to resolve conflicts, and how can you overcome that?
well, the one of the biggest is our assumptions. And that word, it's not just the word, it's big, the concept of assuming. We do, like, I try to remind myself to stop it. We assume we know about that person. And we're not like sitting there going, yep, I know this, and I know that they're this type of person. We don't even know we're assuming. And we make judgments based on what we saw, what we've observed, what we heard, what we read. That's not the whole story. We don't know the whole story. And I don't mean just a story that there was an incident, just about that person. And I'll use an example. There'll be a team, and I'll find out they're not working well together. Let's figure it out. Let's figure out where did we start. And so much of it was the assumptions, like at that first and second meeting together, and how someone acted in the conversation or didn't act. So the quiet one might be misjudged for being aloof, like, yeah, they don't think we're saying anything important because they're not responding. Or the person who's just taking over and saying, nope, I don't like that idea, I have a different idea, they sound like they won't listen. And there's all these assumptions being made because also no one ever takes the lead. Like, I don't have to be the team leader to take the lead in communication, to sit there and like summarize or ask or give other opportunities for people to provide input, because that's what we forget. We're all, and you and I being educators know this, there's all different types of learners. Everyone learns at a different speed. We have to provide that flexibility at work too, no matter how rushed we are. And let's not assume what's happening. So that's a big one, that we assume. And we also assume we know what someone said or wrote. And then we never have a further conversation about it. And that's it. So we just take in the communication, and it's rarely multi-directional. We just take the one direction. I heard them say that, and that's what I know about them. So I think that that's what I mean by the assumption kind of activity is big, because then we build on that and we keep on assuming. And I realize we're built to judge. That's how our mind works. We get information and we judge what's happening. And I learned how I used to, when I first started in this focusing on conflict resolution, I was a mediator and an arbitrator. And arbitration is all about being a judge, receiving all the information and making a decision on the case. Mediator, my opinion is irrelevant, and I'm facilitating the conversation. And when I understood the difference and saw it, I actually needed a week in between when I had to shift my mind, because in one case I was being paid to judge, and in the other case I needed to, my opinion was irrelevant. And I think that happens too in the workplace, that we have to stop the judging and just receive and ask a question. Hey, what are you thinking? Do you have time later to talk about it? They may not want to speak up in the meeting. We've all had this. We've all been in meetings where you feel intimidated to say what you're thinking, and people don't ask the question, and they don't realize everyone else might have had that same question. So
Yeah. It's a fear
there's
of
layers of this.
Yeah, it's a fear of judgment, I think, a lot of times is because, oh, I'm in with my manager and my manager's going to judge me if I ask this question. Another thing is sometimes I've learned in the most recent one is you might be just so proud of your accolades and you like to share it with your group. But if none of your group members in that same wavelength, they just feel that you're bragging at that point, right? So then they feel like you're just oversharing your accolades when it really has something to do with, hey, can you celebrate with me? And so that can also be taken as, oh, she's bragging. And then from there,
Yes.
everything shuts down, right?
Yes.
It's not even the communication of I hurt your feelings or I did something to you. It's more of the people who feel less about what they're doing feel bad about themselves when someone actually wants them to celebrate with them. I've also
Yes.
noticed that. So you just tend to be quiet now. So now you're basically shutting down yourself because you feel that pressure of like, oh, they're just not at that level and they're going to judge you anyway. So might as well shut up.
And it is a struggle because when we're at work, when we're outside of work, we can like encourage each other. It's not me versus you, it's me versus just me. And to get rid of the comparison game. However, at work, the way business and work and many of the workplace environments are is that your manager and your leadership are putting you in competition with other people. So it does become a struggle and it puts a wall between people. The other thing is, I mean, add a toxic workplace in with all of this, where many toxic workplaces, the issue is blame, where mistakes are not welcome. In my head, I don't get that. I understand where it came from, but mistakes, they really are learning. Like, who cares? I remember once saying to a manager, who cares who did it? Let's just all figure out the better way to move forward. What can we learn? The system fell apart last night. So what are we going to do different next time? But if we're going to spend the next 3 days investigating who did this, who did that, then they're never going to want to learn. They're just going to sit there avoiding mistakes. And by the way, they're going to take less chances. They're not going to speak up in meetings when they have an idea because they figured if their idea doesn't work well, they're going to get blamed again. And that whole blame is the source of a lot of conflict. It does, why does it have to be who's right and who's wrong? Why can't it just be
Let's resolve the issue. Yeah, I got that.
yes.
Abimbola says making assumptions can be really detrimental to a relationship. It's better to ask if we are not certain or clear about someone's actions. True, but sometimes what you're feeling, you're not going to ask like, "Why are you making me feel less today?" Like you can't. You see what I mean? Like that's just kind of hard. How do you combat
You
something?
have to
Yeah.
you have to ask what I call the better questions. So rather than like, why are you making me feel this way? We have to get rid of those why questions and ask open questions like, hey, what's happening? What led you to that? Like, what's next? What can we do? We need open questions because otherwise it just becomes a defend and attack. You felt, and you can even talk about, hey, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable here. What's happening? What got us to this point? And a lot of times, especially when it's in the workplace, you find out that there's a mixture of chatting, texting, slacking, whatever software people are using to communicate. And you find out that a lot of times it was from one of those comments. And we're not asking the questions like, hey, let's step back a minute and talk about what are you thinking? What are your ideas? What other ideas do you have?
I like what Sia said. She said, great point, Leslie. Open questions, easier said than done. That is so true.
Oh,
Because sometimes like I said, when you're sharing and then somebody else, let's say, coworker A is feeling like I've never done any of those. Like, I don't understand how she could do all of those and blah, blah, blah. You can't address those issues. And that, like you said before, way before, like it's always that conflict from the very beginning, not necessarily of what you said to them, but what you said in general sometimes offends people without you knowing that it offended people. That's another issue because I've done it. I'm guilty as charged. Like sometimes I look at people and when they're saying something on comments, especially on LinkedIn, but then what their actions doesn't align, I shut down. I'm like, why do I even bother to get to know this person? They're not even in alignment with what they're saying in their messages, right? When I'm losing opportunity to get to know a really awesome person, I'm judging it based on one incident and one conversation. And like I said, I have to be graceful because we're going through a lot of things a lot of times. And sometimes you might caught the conversation where someone was feeling low, and you shouldn't just judge person based on that one time. But it's when it's multiple times, that's when I'm like, I don't know, that's questionable.
So one thing, and this is hard to do, there's one time that I would say is good to assume. Whatever someone said to us, if we first assume positive intent until fact tells you differently, then just, and especially when it's all communication based, assume there's positive intent and then just kind of hear the words versus maybe you saw some body language that gave you a hint that you thought it was negative. You had an emotion that was negative. Just we have to like rid ourselves of that sometimes, or just like put it a little bit to the side and then ask a question. And the question can't be like, you see how obnoxious you're being right now, don't you? That's not going to work. We're not going to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not sure I heard you correctly. Could you describe it differently? Or I can just start to interpret it because that's a lot of times when they hear it. If I repeat that question to someone and go, let me just ask you the question you just asked me. So you're being an idiot right now, aren't you? Oh, okay, that doesn't sound so good, does it? No.
No.
So I said, by the way, it's not even a question. You're asking me a leading question. You're telling me how to answer. I'm going to tell you I'm being, crazy person right now. No, I'm not. So changing that, we're not accustomed to asking open questions. I can tell you, I do this exercise. I call sometimes it's more like a trick. People writing out questions and then we start categorizing them. And I want you to know, I've done this for over 15 years with different groups, different students, all different ages. The percentage of focused and closed questions, and focus being like very, the yes and the no, the closed, the leading, more than 75% of their questions will all be closed. Some will be focused, which can be an open question, but it's very directed, like versus me going, hey, what's happening? That would be really open. And I might say to you, what happened last night? So maybe what I'm thinking about didn't happen last night, but you're not going to tell me because I just focused you only on last night. So when you add that in, more than 95% of the questions that we naturally ask are this like when, why, what, very factual, yes and no, instead of the and,
Yeah. I think,
what, how. We're not accustomed to saying how.
yeah.
We add to it, how do you do that? How will I do that? Like drop the rest. Or we ask 14 questions at the same time. What are you thinking about that? Oh, is that really going to work? And we need to like stop ourselves and write them down. Write down the next questions, and we may never ask them because once you hear what they have to say, you may go in a totally different direction because your questions assumed what the answers were.
Yeah, that is the problem. Amber has a question. Says there are times when the other person stops communicating, cuts all ties. Your advice to them?
That's so general that I'm guessing there's some specific scenarios. The one thing is, I'll just give an example of what to do. Say it's someone at work. You may get a go-between. Like, hey, you know what? Amber really wants to work with you, and maybe the three of us could meet to figure out a new way of the two of you talking to each other. So getting someone else to intervene that you both trust, specifically pick someone that you think the other person trusts. Other than a specific scenario, it's hard to give a general way to do it, but that's one way to do it, because most people figure out why they shut down. It may take another channel of communication. Write the note, write the letter, but not the long-winded of like defending yourself and deciding what they're thinking, just with a question. Listen, I really want to work with you, or, still be in touch with you, whatever it is, whether it's family or workers. I really want to be in touch with you. I'd love to figure out how to do that going forward. What do you suggest?
Wow, I love that. Amber, you heard that? That is something Leslie just did. Now, my last question for the day, I know we're over, but I really love this conversation. If this is your last day today on this earth, what would be your parting message to your current and future families in terms of living life, legacy, and impact?
Wow, that's a lot of pressure. Okay, so I'm going to answer it in three like phrases or statements. So, with regard to the past, I would tell them reflect without regrets and don't stay in the past. For the present, I would say make sure you smile and you laugh and you're kind every single day, and the gifts will come back to you. And for the future, I would say dream big, dream bigger, and just make it happen.
Wow, that was impactful, actually. I love that. Yeah, smile. I used to not smile because I hate when I smile, I hate it. I hate my whole facial structure. Like, ugh. So, and I
Your
was like,
face lights up. Your
I know,
face lights up.
but
I love it.
I don't really like to smile a lot, even on pictures. I'm always like not smiling. And my daughter says, "Mom, actually, when you smile, you're more welcoming and you don't have that resting face." I was like, "Wow, thanks." And because she's like, on the car line, my friends wanted to say hi to you, but when they come towards the car and you have the face and they're like, you're not smiling, they're like, "See you later, Bella." Like they don't want to say hi to you. I'm like, oh my gosh. I hope I'm not giving like that to children. And she's like, yeah, just a little, So now I'm just smiling randomly. She's like, Mom, don't smile too much, like it's like you can never smile enough. But thank you so much for your time today. This has been
Oh,
amazing. Um,
thank you for having me.
yeah, Dan's like, I'm preschool rich. Oh, preschool registration, Dan, that is so cool. He's in our YouTube right now. Haseen was also on our YouTube, so this was amazing. And Paul says, I also look at it as you don't need me, you have to want me. I've been learning the best solution for me is to remove expectations and just be myself and let the rest. Yeah, I give without expectations, because when you're expecting
Yes.
something, more likely negative things happen. So when you give without expectations, your heart is actually fuller. That's
Yes,
for sure.
absolutely. Or if you have an expectation, actually say it out loud, because they can't read what's in your mind. And there could be a conversation about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's so nice
Thank
to have
you.
you.
And I
Uh,
want to leave with my favorite thing to say, show your heart. Like
oh,
that's what it really comes down to. If we
yes.
show our heart, we can find the way to communicate more effectively.
Yeah. Lead with your heart too. Lead with your heart.
Mm.